what was different about the fire that we were experiencing was it was immediate, it was furious, it was planned, it was coordinated, and it was effective. Usually when you go into a village like this, they don't want to decisively engage you. They actually do not want to stay and fight. They want to get a couple pot shots off, they want to make their point, and they want to go before the helicopters come on station or their artillery rounds start to hit on top of them. They want to get out of there. This time it was immediate, decisive, and you could tell they wanted to stay and fight because it's coming directly from the village. We have lost contact with our forward element of Afghans and their Marine advisors. And it sounded pretty dire the last time we had comms with them. So our headquarters element now starts to take casualties. And before you know it, the Marine Corps major who's in charge of the operation, ultimately, he gets shot. His sergeant major gets a massive concussion from our RPG that hits right next to his head. The Afghans that are with us, killed. Interpreters, dead. During all this, the enemy is actually flanking us, which is something new. It's different. We're not used to being flanked. Usually the enemy doesn't want to maneuver on you because they know if they do, they're exposed and the helicopters will eventually clean them up, or we'll drop artillery, or we'll outflank them. This is where we start getting into some of the problems. We had pre-planned artillery targets. The local coalition partners would not fire that target for us.
Which are Afghan?
Which are Americans.
Americans, okay.
And this is a problem because it's a pre-coordinated target. As a professional warfighter, I have certain capabilities that I expect to be there, kind of like brakes on a car.
Yeah.
If you go for the brakes, you expect them to be there. If the brakes aren't there, that's a problem.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of The Resilient Show. And I'm here today with William Swenson, who is a Medal of Honor recipient, an amazing American hero. And man, we threw this together last minute, but just had lunch together. We stuffed our bellies with fajitas, getting to know each other. And you're not only an amazing hero, but you seem like a pretty amazing human being. We have a lot of mutual friends, Jay Redman, Loomis over at TurboVets. And you're still doing some great things. So it's super awesome to have you on the show.
Of course, let's make sure that the most important thing is mentioned. The reason I'm here last minute is because the SEALs failed and an Army guy had to come in and save their asses.
That's right. Yeah. Jay did pull out. Jay Redman, did pull out, and he came in and covered for him. But before we get going, I want to get a chance to just read a little bit about you, because not only you're somebody embody courage in the battlefield, but you use your platform to hold leadership accountable for the after, what is necessary for after actions, when you have something like what you were involved in. And so I think you've really stood out for that. That's how I was introduced about you, is that you're someone that's principled and stood up for important things for the next generation behind you. So I really want to make sure we talk about that. But Lieutenant Colonel William Swenson, a captain at the time, was awarded the Medal of Honor and recognized for extraordinary heroism during Operation Baribosa II in Afghanistan. Where outnumbered and under fire, he repeatedly risked his life to save others. After the battle, which claimed the lives of 15 coalition and ANSAF deaths, plus 17 more who were wounded in action, William spoke out against command decisions, gave an after-action report that offered the opportunity to make things better for the next generation. Amazing man of courage on the battlefield and off the battlefield. And while you became a Medal of Honor recipient as a captain, you stayed in and continued and just retired at the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. So congratulations on your retirement.
Outstanding. Appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, you do probably a lot of speaking. I'm sure as a Medal of Honor recipient, you've done a lot of speaking and a lot of talking about your story. So many may be familiar with your story, but for those who are not familiar with your story, can we jump right in and talk about what Operation Baribosa was? What was the surrounding environment of the circumstances during your Medal of Honor?
Yeah, and that's one of the things about being a Medal of Honor recipient is it gives me the opportunity to tell a story that maybe wouldn't otherwise be heard. If it hadn't been highlighted, that battle specifically by Medal of Honor actions, it could have been potentially lost into the smaller subset of storytelling of military warfare. But this is something that I get to now bring to the fore. I get to tell the story of service members who did such amazing things on behalf of their country and on behalf of their allies.
Yeah.
You got to see on that day true resilience, true commitment, and what people are willing to give up for service and for their team. And, as a recipient as well, one of the things I get to always say is who did not come back from that battlefield. So I get to say their names, Johnson, Kennefic, Layton, and Westbrook. Those are 5 Americans who gave everything on that battlefield. And they never got to turn back to their families and, return home. And so that's one of the things that's most important in telling these stories is understanding that it's not just this one story. I get to tell this story because of the position I have, but there's so many other stories that should be heard. So that's one thing that I implore people to do is always listen. If somebody has a story like this, you need to listen. There's so much to take from it. There's so much important things you can find that not only are on the battlefield, but also reflect in you as an American citizen, what you too can do as a citizen for your country. So with that, yeah, we can jump right into the battle.
Yeah, I mean, and first of all, I want to say with that, not too many Medal of Honor recipients actually had that opportunity. Medal of Honor is often awarded post-mortem.
Right. It's a posthumous award.
Yeah.
More often than not.
Yeah. So the fact that, as a living Medal of Honor recipient, you've seen and participated in something that, most never will. And you get to tell a very, personal testimony of what it was like on a day like what you experienced. Yeah.
Sure. So, one of the things that a lot of people who were in Afghanistan in that sort of 2007, 8, 9, 10 period of time, what they'll reflect on was we'd lost a lot of our momentum politically behind what we were doing in Afghanistan. There was a lot of political frustration with what was happening on the battlefield, on the ground, where we were getting objectively. We didn't really have the takeaways that we wanted from that war. And we had an administration that was looking for tangible wins and tangible pathways out. They'd even vocalized that they were looking for a way out. Mm-hmm. And it was still very much an economy of thrift. We didn't have the surge at this point. And we had a lot of transition happening due to the concurrent wars elsewhere in the world that were drawing a lot of the attention, a lot of the resources, and also making our difficult in Afghanistan more complicated as a result of that conflict between
spread thinner, rules of engagement changed.
Absolutely. And of course, a lot of these
in 2008
political decisions as well as just simple material decisions. So during that time, economy of thrift, not as many people in Afghanistan as one would think. Still a very important mission, and it was becoming more and more kinetic, more and more violent. The enemy was getting better and better at fighting back. And there was also a lot more actors on the battlefield at this point. The Taliban and Al-Qaeda had actually sort of regrouped. Pakistan, obviously next door, started to realize that they had their own objectives that they wanted to work with. And then we had some other malign actors from the region who started to come in as well to sort of fill that vacuum that we had provided. And so when I came into country, my mission set was specifically to work with the Afghan National Security Forces. And in this case, it was the Afghan Border Patrol. And the Afghan Border Patrol were a very interesting group of people in the sense that they were paramilitary. They were equipped as infantry, better than the infantry actually that the Afghan National Army had, but they also had police authorities. So with that, it gave them a lot more latitude to act quickly, dynamically, and actually be able to action on targets much quicker. And like our decision loop was effectively, we see the problem, we can go. Whereas the ANA was being professionalized and was being really utilized as a professional military force, which slowed down their capabilities to react. So we became a very effective force in the sense that we had those police authorities, we could move quickly, and most importantly, my guys were from their region. So most of the troops that we had in the Afghan Border Patrol were from the regions that they were fighting in. So that meant that they actually had connections to the community. They understood it. They understood objectively what needed to be done and what took it too far. And that gave us legitimacy in the community as well as an unfettered ability to ferret out the actual enemy that was a threat to both of us.
Yeah.
The United States as well as the Afghan people.
Yeah. Which those who've never been to Afghanistan before, most people listening, it's having those like cultural understandings, like the territorial, like things that like just knowing who belongs in an area, what is worn in an area, different types of rules and regulations that are in areas that aren't 5 miles away. Like that's so important to know.
Right. Just, valley to valley, you had a totally different culture, totally different political system, totally different, familial relations that date back 1,000 years, and they don't, the two shall not touch.
Yeah.
And so as advisors to the Afghan Border Patrol, one of my key objectives was taking the burden off the American warfighter and putting it where it belonged, which is on the Afghans. We had already spoken of it from the strategic level of how we took the mission set away from the U.S. fighter and put it on the Afghans. Afghan government, sponsored, Afghan military planned, Afghan military executed. It was the Afghans who should be fighting on behalf of their country. And then we, as the United States and our coalition partners, our responsibility was to support them. And if you look back, the sort of armchair quarterback, some of these events, some of them went better than others. We look at some of the events that the Marine Corps was doing, which was very aggressive, trying to get the Afghans out, and to retake territory in the Southwest. And if you looked at the ratios, you started to find out it was 10 Marines for every Afghan. So the whole Afghan-led, Afghan-fought thing, it wasn't a good ratio. Right. So for me, I had a very effective fighting force. It had significant capabilities. It had some serious gaps. And what I wanted them to do was truly take over the mantle of what previous units had done, the U.S. units had done, which was take the fight to the enemy. I wanted the Afghans to take the fight to the enemy, and I wanted them to be empowered to do so. And that's a multifaceted approach. You can't just say, hey, go off and fight, because they don't want to go off and get killed, because they would. They don't have the aviation support. They don't have the intelligence capacity. They don't have the medevac. They don't have all the resources that the U.S. brings to bear. So you had to really empower them and build up their confidence, and also get them to understand that legitimacy in their community had to be broader than that one valley that they came from. It had to transcend over to the next valley over. So I'd been working with this unit, this specific unit in this specific area of Kunar province. I'd worked with them for over a year or almost a year at this point. And I established a very good relationship with them, a very good working relationship. I was very confident in their capabilities, and it was really time for them to take the lead on every mission from that point forward. And the local conventional American unit that had come on board was both a fantastic partner as well as had the right mindset on how to make this relationship work with their Afghan partners. They fully understood their responsibility wasn't to go and chase the enemy. It was to let the Afghans do their job and support. Okay. And so it was a great opportunity for us to truly get those missions working. And on this specific mission, as you referenced, it was 2. It was the second phase of our operation that had started at an earlier period, a month prior. And what these missions were trying to do is project government authority and government legitimacy into this one valley that was directly adjacent to the coalition landowners' base. We're talking 5 kilometers, but was effectively out of control. It was not controlled by the U.S. It was not controlled by the Afghans. It was held by a combination of a criminal element as well as some malign actors from the Pakistani side of the border, because it was adjacent to Pakistan, and something that we'd roughly still call Taliban. But it was just a bad group of people that were really causing a lot of problems in a province that was slowly starting to shift towards seeing the Afghan government as legitimate and as actually being able to project authority and power and legitimacy. So our first operation that we did in that valley was led by the Afghan Border Patrol, my guys, and it was supported by the Afghan National Army with the local coalition fighting for the 10th Mountain guys, the local coalition partner, to project that authority into the valley. And it was a successful mission. We went in, we met with the elders, we did the whole 3 cups of tea thing, we had a wonderful conversation, we told what we wanted to do, and we explained, we'll be back. And we want to have this conversation, but we want to have it with the village adjacent to yours. And they were very close in communication, but they understood that next village was the real main objective.
Can you, for those listening that are in the military, can you explain, because this, what you're talking about is a traditional support and advisory role of local nationals. Can you give us a picture of what that looked like from organizational manpower?
Sure.
So American and coalition forces.
Foreign internal defense. You want to take the fewest amount of Americans and the least amount of American resources, and you want to maximize the efforts of the local fighting force, the local legitimate indigenous force. And so in this case, I had 3 Kandaks, 3 battalions of Afghan Border Patrol that were arrayed starting in Nuristan in northern Afghanistan through Kunar, and then one of them was parked down in Nangarhar. It was an enormous amount of terrain that abutted the Pakistani border. I had 750 border patrolmen. I had effectively a battalion, a Kandak's battalion, so I had 3 of those, and that was a colonel, usually a full colonel, that was sent by Kabul. So they were usually from a different province. They were professionally trained, military trained, educated, experienced.
Probably English speaking.
Not always. Not always. So we had. But they were professionally trained, and a lot of them came from a Soviet background. So they actually had a very good understanding of the mechanics of war and logistics and everything along those lines. And then everything below them was mostly regional. And that's where you start talking about the truly indigenous, truly local forces. And again, they're configured much like light infantry. So usual small arms, some light capabilities like mortar systems. They had unarmored trucks. We had a few armored Humvees. The usual assortment of light infantry equipment. Right. But they didn't have artillery. They didn't have aviation support. They didn't have a lot of those higher end capabilities that you traditionally see in like an infantry unit. So on this specific day, we were working with one specific Kandak of Afghan Border Patrol, and we had their headquarters element and about one of their platoons. And so we were in a supporting role. So that's approximately, you're looking at about 40 Border Patrolmen who were supporting a larger mission with the Afghan National Army, who had a traditional infantry task organization. Right. So more, combat focused. They had more organic capabilities. They had heavier mortar systems. They actually had organic artillery nearby. But again, no aviation support, none of the higher end capabilities. And they had about 2 companies to bring to bear for this operation. But one thing about these operations is you're talking about, I think, about 100 friendlies. Is when you think about a geographic area that covers dozen square kilometers, that's not a lot of people, because as you start parsing out people up onto ridge tops, controlling egress and most dangerous routes of egress or ingress for the enemy, who's watching the vehicles, who's on the road. By the time you get down to it, the actual maneuver force that went into the village on this specific day was about 40 friendlies. To include, you had 5 Marines and a Navy corpsman, and then you had 2 Army guys, myself and my counterpart, that were actually in the moving formation that went into the village that ended up being involved in this battle.
Who are these Marines?
So the Marines, they were a advisory team. They'd come from Okinawa.
Okay.
They had recently come into country, but they were they had a really good training set prior to coming over to country. They understood the problem. They understood how to come in and work with their Afghans very effectively. There's about 16 of them. They were arrayed over a pretty wide area as well. They had a pretty broad responsibility. But they were a very good organization to work with. Very competent, very professional. And their Afghans had done a pretty good job of being trained up by previous iterations of Marines who had the responsibility in that region for the last 3 or 4 years.
Okay, so what's the mission for you guys?
So mission 1 was to approach that first village, project legitimacy, authority, and power of the Afghan government. And mission went well. There's this cliche that, in Afghanistan, you go into a village, you have tea, you have a wonderful conversation with the elders, and then they apologize that on the way out that you're going to have a gunfight, because that's just what they have to do to maintain their own legitimacy and optics with their people or whomever else is watching. So we had a lovely gunfight on the way out the door. Nobody got particularly hurt, and that was operation number 1. Pretty traditional problem set for that region. The second operation, which is a follow-on operation, was a known planned event. They knew we were coming. We told them we were coming. We told them what day we were coming on. And we told them we wanted to have a sit-down meeting. We wanted to have a conversation. But this time, because they already knew that we'd had this conversation in the previous village, this time around, we're coming in knowing that there might be a threat, and that we're prepared for that threat, and that we'll be coming in with that posture, and that we hope that they're going to have a conversation with us. But if it's not a conversation, we're there to fight, but we're not there to stay. We'll retract and we'll come back another day and it'll be full combat. Their choice. And we put that onus on them and we made it very clear. So on the second operation, which unfortunately it's a compromised operation, you told the enemy what time you're coming. You told them how you're coming, because there's only one way in. And everyone that we work with, we can't put them on isolation. So our Afghans, we told them the plan and had to send them home. You can't just lock them down on base. Just doesn't work that way. So everyone knows what's going to happen the next day. It's a compromised operation. Just is what it is.
Yeah.
We go into the village, and on this specific objective, some of the usual risk factors that we would see had changed. They had already put decoys out on the road that looked like IEDs to stall us, to stop our ground movement with vehicles. They had turned off all the lights in the village. So there was no lighting whatsoever. So it was just one generator. It's a small village, but there was no light in the village. And it was completely dead silent. So clearly something had changed. It was a different village than we had seen before. And we'll get to it eventually, but unbeknownst to us is because the enemy had changed. So as we're going into the village, we encounter fire, which we had expected and we'd planned for. And what was different about the fire that we were experiencing was it was immediate, it was furious, it was planned, it was coordinated, and it was effective. That was different. Usually when you go into a village like this, they don't want to decisively engage you. They actually do not want to stay and fight. They want to get a couple pot shots off. They want to make their point, and they want to go before the helicopters come on station or their artillery rounds start to hit on top of them. They want to get out of there. This time it was immediate, decisive, and you could tell they wanted to stay and fight because it's coming directly from the village. That's a change in TTPs and tactics for the enemies. So we looked at the threat. We understood it. At this time, we wanted to start to call in our plan to withdraw because we weren't there to stay and fight. We were there to talk. As we said, we'll fight our way back and we'll come back another day. Well, this is where we start getting into some of the problems. We had pre-planned artillery targets, and we had a pre-planned artillery target that was a linear target that would put down smoke between us and the village. So, for those who don't understand what a pre-planned artillery target is, it means that you, before the mission, went in, you talked to the fire support officer, and you dumped into their computers a pre-coordinated target with the type of rounds that you want. Mm-hmm. And the firing batteries know that pre-planned target is going to be called potentially, so they have the rounds waiting, ready to go.
You don't have to decide, communicate.
There's no thinking. Delay. You push a button, that target gets fired, you get the effects that you want. Mm-hmm. And those rounds are ready to go. They don't have to go looking through the cargo hold looking for the rounds. This is all pre-planned. The type, where they go, what gets shot when. Well, this is where the breakdown happens. They wouldn't fire the target. The local coalition partners would not fire that target for us.
Which are Afghan?
Which are Americans.
Americans, okay.
And this is a problem because it's a pre-coordinated target. Mm-hmm. And that means, according to the way that the U.S. fights, mm-hmm. as a professional warfighter, I have certain capabilities that I expect to be there, kind of like brakes on a car. Yeah. If you go for the brakes, you expect them to be there. If the brakes aren't there, that's a problem. And in this case, those were our brakes. We're doing an operation. We're going in full speed. We're coming up to a corner. We're going for the brakes now because clearly the corner's sharper than we thought, and we have to adjust. Well, the brakes aren't there. It starts falling apart. In the absence of having that pre-planned fire, the pre-planned fires, we were exposed, completely exposed. And we go to plan B, start trying to fire the other pre-planned targets that were on the known locations that the enemy had previously used to shoot at us. I mean, this is such a routine operation that we know where the enemy's going to be and where they're going to shoot at us. We know they're going to go into the cave. They know we're going to retract, and that's the end of it. In this case, some of those targets were there, but not all of them. Those targets were down in the village. Well, politics had changed. For us to fire into the village, we couldn't do it. It's a village. They're civilians, which is true. Well, now we don't have our pre-planned targets that were going to provide us our screen to withdraw. We can't fire on the actual known enemy locations because they're in the village. They're using the village as cover. And now we're starting to take casualties. And this is decisive fire. It's different. It's effective. It's continuous. Call in the helicopters. Helicopters aren't available. They're tasked out somewhere else. All right, well, you never plan on helicopters, you plan on artillery. Well, the artillery wasn't working. So now the brakes aren't working, the gas is broken, and the steering wheel is coming loose. Operation's falling apart. Again, you expect all these things to be here. That's the professional way of fighting.
Right.
More casualties mount. Time goes on. And at this juncture, we have lost contact with our forward element of Afghans and their Marine advisors. So you had 3 Marines, 1 Navy corpsman, and you had the advanced platoon of the Afghans. No comms. And it sounded pretty dire the last time we had comms with them.
This is between you and the village, the opposing force.
Yep. So myself and my colleague, who were actually in the supporting role with the Afghan border police in the rear, we moved to the front, to the element that the Marine headquarters element is located in, which is fairly close to where they lost contact with their Marines further forward. And we're about, I'd say, 300 meters from the village now at this point. And the Marines that were lost were about 50 meters from the village. So we are now trying to figure out how to move forward and recover contact with that element. But it's becoming very clear that we can't do that. It's just not going to happen because our headquarters element now starts to take casualties. And before you know it, the Marine Corps major who's in charge of the operation, ultimately, he gets shot. His sergeant major gets a massive concussion from our RPG that hits right next to his head. The Afghans that are with us, killed. Interpreters, dead. You start racking up serious casualties. And during all this, the enemy is actually flanking us, which is something new. It's different. We're not used to being flanked. Usually the enemy doesn't want to maneuver on you because they know if they do, they're exposed and the helicopters will eventually clean them up, or we'll drop artillery, or we'll outflank them. In this case, they knew that they had taken the day. And some of our actual supporting elements that were further up in the ridge lines, they too are getting directly attacked and maneuvered on. This is different. So with all of this happening, and with effectively only now 3 U.S. coalition that are not killed or injured seriously, we have a serious problem on our hands. How do we do a mass casualty evacuation under direct fire of the enemy? And we have to maneuver across effectively a kilometer of open space. Well, that's what we had to do. And so for the better part of 2 hours, we had to do a succession of bounds backwards without any supporting artillery fire that was effective because they wouldn't drop in the village, without any helicopter support, and with even our supporting elements being engaged to the point where they could not provide us with the effective fire that we were going to require to pull out. So that was about 2 hours. As we were moving back, taking more and more casualties, we finally got closer to where we'd put our ORP, our release point. Mm-hmm. And that's when we started to get some of the support from the vehicle patrol base that we'd set up further down. And we got a Humvee up online with us that was able to start putting down effective fire. And at that time, we got helicopter support coming on board. Usually when helicopters come on board, Taliban stops firing.
Yeah.
They kept shooting. Helicopters were kind of confused by this. They have a lot of targets. They're buried deep in the village, and they have to find out if they can engage. As they engage, it's a village. Walls are about a meter or two thick. You know, these were Kiowas that came on station. Kiowas have a 50 cal, and they have a couple of Hellfires. By and large, the Hellfires will punch through a wall, but they only carry 2. The 50 cal is mostly there for theatrics. We had these helicopter pilots going Winchester. They blew through all of their ammo supporting us, and then stayed on station as long as they could until their personal weapons were dry. They took effective fire and had to go back, refuel back at the FARP, and some of their aircraft had been hit. So we're talking about this is a changed situation. Up in the air, on the ground. But we still have 3 missing Marines, a missing Navy corpsman, and all of their Afghans that are somewhere up in the village. So we start getting some CASEVAC in. We start moving some of our injured off the battlefield. Mm-hmm. We try to get ourselves recollected. And between myself and a few of the uninjured Americans, we cobbled together a QRF force to go back up to the objective and start to try to find the wounded, dead, and missing.
So for those, a quick reaction force.
Yep. And in the interest of of speed and availability, my personal vehicle, which is an unarmored Ford truck, we used that because it was a great idea. Why not?
Yeah.
And so myself and a few other people hopped into my unarmored truck, and with the support of a Humvee, an armored Humvee in back of us, we drove back up towards the village trying to find the wounded and dead. And there was a significant amount of wounded and dead. And as we moved up the valley, we grabbed who we could, when we could, and we turned back, drop them off, go back up again, repeat, load up the dead and wounded, return back, and just keep trying to fight our way up the valley. At some point, my truck had it. It was shot up. It was a total mess. It was a really bad idea. And some more of the armored vehicles had made it up to the ORP. So we swapped out my vehicle and we went back up into the objective with a few more armored vehicles.
So we get closer. We
swapped out for armor, and we got right up into the village. And around this time, we had, and this is about 6 hours into the battle now, 6 hours. By this point now, we have Kiowas, we have Apaches, we have F-15s, we have a B-1 on station. I mean, we were starting to get some real assets, and the local coalition owners realized, oops, we probably should have started hitting that village sooner. Now they're allowing more free fire on the targets that needed to get hit, but we're still taking fire. The medevac birds are taking rounds. The Kiowas are getting shot at. It's a very different battle. And through all of this, you're looking at an entrenched enemy in hardened structures with trench lines to operate with, where they can maneuver without being engaged by helicopters or by our supporting elements. We have 15 wounded and dead. We have 15 dead. We have wounded everywhere. Comms are lost, and we still cannot find our Marines and our Navy corpsmen. On our last trip up, the Kiowas had spotted. Actually, we had a PJ bird come on station at this point. One of the PJ birds came on board. They did a swoop over the village. They spotted the dead. It was clear that we had lost our Marine Corps element and our Navy corpsmen, and it became a recovery mission. Went back out, picked them up, got them in the vehicles. We said, that's it, we're out. Returned back to the ORP, head back to base. Established a position to hold what we had, and we had to do a reset at that point. Mm-hmm. Mass casualty event, and we clearly had to reboot and restock. We didn't know quite what we were up against. What we realized was we had a significant change in who we were fighting against. So later that evening, we had, after we started getting reinforcements brought in, we had an ODA go through with their team and clear the village. At that time, all the weapons had been hidden.
Say ODA for those listening is it's the
Special Forces team.
Green Berets.
Yeah, so as Green Berets go in, a Special Forces team goes into the village at night. And at this point, most of the fighters had already withdrawn back into the Pakistani side. They'd been observed doing so by our aviation. And, it was an unfortunate situation that we basically let them escape. But they knew what they were doing. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, some good did come of this. The resiliency of the Afghan government was shown. The commitment of the Afghan warfighter was proven. And more importantly, I think, the Afghans saw that the Americans were willing to fight alongside of them, for them, and even put themselves at great risk to recover them if need be. Mm-hmm. So that really helped build that bond in a way that I don't think had been really forged before. There was a distrust. And at this point, that trust was built. Obviously, we had lost a significant amount of people, but we had forged trust, at least in understanding we meant we were going to fight side by side for each other, with each other, for the objective of better Afghanistan.
This reminds me of during Afghan withdrawal, and you and I spoke about the Afghan withdrawal earlier. The President Biden made a statement from the White House that it really bothered me, and I've even apologized to my Afghan friends on behalf of our country for it. That a president would say that. He said, if they won't fight for their own country, then why should we fight for them? And we've seen, you just illustrated their willingness to fight for their own country and for their people and for their villages, and 60,000 of them gave their life for the last 20 years in the war of terror.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people don't really realize, is that sheer number of how many Afghans died fighting for a better Afghanistan. So again, if you have to find good in that day, it was seeing that commitment that the Afghans were willing to show when they were supported to do their mission.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is what changed that day specifically. We were fighting Pakistani Taliban. It was Tehrik-e-Talibani, Lashkar-e-Taiba. The Pakistani military had their fill of the shenanigans of the Taliban on their side of the border. They were no longer playing by the rules that the ISI and the Pakistani government had given the Taliban to fight by, and they turned on the actual, the Pakistanis. So the Pakistanis had a big conventional push through the valley. They pushed them out militarily. They pushed them up into us, up and over the border. Yeah. And that's who we were fighting against, was a fairly competent fighting force.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, much more sophisticated.
More sophisticated, but also a different mindset. They were there to stay and fight. Mm-hmm. They had to stay, hold, and fight, because the alternative was returning back to Pakistan, where they're being pursued by actual main battle tanks.
Right.
This was a better side of the border to be on, and they also saw that they could objectively hold territory. Mm-hmm. If they fought hard enough, they could actually hold territory. Yeah. Whereas the Afghan Taliban, they had a long game. They understood that you fight only enough to achieve the result that you need with the minimum amount of effort. These guys were willing to stay, hold, and fight for ideological reasons, and they did.
I want to bring something up. I didn't plan to do this, but it'll take me 1 second, so I apologize. In 2008, the ROEs very much changed. For those listening, ROEs are rules of engagement. So essentially the rules that we have to follow in combat in order to engage the enemy. And the White House dictates those rules on our service members. during President Bush's time as commander-in-chief, 630 troops were killed, 2,645 were wounded in Afghanistan. During President Obama's tenure, 1,758 troops were killed and 17,600 were wounded. So we went from 600 killed to 1,758 killed. We went from 2,645 wounded to 17,592 wounded. And then you go forward, the rules of engagement change again in 2016 when President Trump comes in, and we see only 64 troops killed in Afghanistan and 425 wounded. Rules of engagement in combat is not only safer for us as service members, but for the civilian populace as well of Afghans. You hear those numbers like that and the restrictions that, a warfighter like you is under and how it puts lives at stake.
And this is the political component of it. And it's so frustrating to hear those numbers because from the outset, you can say, okay, what's the cause-effect relationship between all of that and what's the higher good? So if it's politically expedient to say that the reason we had those rules of engagement was because we simply had too many civilian casualties. Now, obviously, one civilian casualty is probably a civilian casualty that's a tragedy. But as an objective warfighter, you have to say, is it too many? Mm-hmm. Is that part of the unnecessary process of warfighting? And it's not to disassociate or desensitize the fact that civilian casualties should be mitigated and made the absolute minimum possible. But to fight a conflict, to fight a war, you have to fight. And there is loss. And civilians do get in the way. It's an unfortunate component of war. But what's more unfortunate is if you don't defeat the enemy, those civilians are left in the line of fire for a longer period of time. Mm-hmm. And more of them die too. Because I guarantee you, if you look at how many civilians died, even with our ROE change,
I would say it's higher.
It's higher because it took longer and we never achieved our result.
That's right.
And that's what's frustrating. Is not only were we losing U.S. Fighting capacity and real people, real Americans, mm-hmm. we were also not achieving the goals that we needed to achieve to get those Americans to an end state where they said, we're good. We've met our objectives in Afghanistan. We've transitioned authority over to the Afghan people. The Afghan people have chosen the government of their choosing, cessation of hostilities. That is why you have to fight to win. That is why you have to fight with the tools that you have to win. And one of the things that always grated on me was when we were told, you have the right to self-defense. Mm-hmm. Well, we're fighting a war. I have the right to destroy the enemy before they destroy me. Right. Not I have to wait for them to shoot at me to shoot them. That's absurd. And that's one of the reasons that war drug out 20 years. That's one of the reasons why we didn't get a satisfactory end to the war. That's why the Afghan people did not get the end state that they probably wanted. Mm. I mean, as you and I know, the Afghans didn't want the Taliban, but they also just wanted the fighting to stop.
That's right.
And one of the things that I found very interesting about my specific unit, again, my guys are coming from the very valleys they're fighting in. Their cousins are sometimes shooting at them. They said, why are the Americans not more aggressive? Why do you tolerate what you do? Why are the B-52s not carpet bombing like the Soviets did? Now, obviously, the ethical considerations of that is, well, that was savagery, and we are much more focused and surgical in our application of force and violence. But they had a point. To stop the fighting, you have to win. You have to show authority. You have to show capacity. And the ROE, as well-intentioned as it was wrong.
Yeah.
It stopped us from achieving the goals, and it stopped us from protecting our service members, and it stopped us from ultimately making Afghanistan a better place.
Yeah, a warfighter can't win a war in the functions of self-defense.
And you'll look at what happened after 2010. We started to loosen the ROEs. And by the time you start talking about a Ramadi or a Syria or somewhere like that, the ROEs are back towards the warfighter's need, which is they objectively say, I need that target destroyed. I understand the consequences. And as a professional warfighter, not a sociopath, as a professional warfighter, I understand that there is consequences to that are beyond destroying the enemy. But it's necessary to achieve the goal.
So one of the things that, you've been credited for is the courage to speak up against some of those failures. What did that look like, and how was that received? After actions are for a reason. It's not just a report. It's actually after actions to be used, so that way we could protect future generations.
So, and part of the complication of Afghanistan too was it was very difficult to figure out who was responsible for what. So I came from an advisory mission, and I had a siloed chain of command that went straight back to Kabul. You then had a conventional landowner. Conventional landowner means basically the unit that is the American unit that's ostensibly responsible for the area that they're in. And in this case, it was the 10th Mountain Division, fantastic unit, 132, phenomenal unit.
Yes.
And even with the best of intentions, they too were limited. But I didn't belong to them. They didn't belong to me. They didn't technically have authorities over me. They didn't have authorities over the Marines who trained the Afghan National Army. They certainly didn't have authorities over the Afghan Border Police. Before you know it, who's in charge of what? So that's a problem right there, figuring out who is in charge. And additional to that, Marine Corps is Department of Navy, Army is Department of Army. Between those two organizations, who connects where? So after that operation, there was a lot of tension between Department of Navy and Department of Army for the fact that the Navy decided that the Army had withheld the necessary effects, the artillery, the pre-planned targets, to support their warfighters. And they were correct.
Ultimately, consequently, they died.
And we lost 3 Marines and 1 Navy corpsman.
Right.
And I lost my 1 soldier. So between that, as the bureaucracy of the military is wont to do, they look to assign blame very quickly. So we say the AAR process, the after action review, where professional warfighters get together after an operation, whatever that is, from a simple vehicle movement to an actual combat operation. You sit down, you talk about what happened, what was good, what was bad, how we're going to fix it the next time around, and we move on. We say no thin skins because people need to assign blame where blame belongs. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to fix the problem unless you can point to the problem and say, here was the problem. How do we fix this? No thin skins. How do you fix it? It might be a leadership challenge. If it's a leadership challenge, can we fix the leader or do we need a new one? That's one way to do it. Do we do something wrong with OPSEC, operational security? Do we do something wrong with our intelligence planning process? What went wrong? So that process right there was done professionally, and it was done in an environment where there should have been no thin skins. And so if you have somebody like myself pointing to where the operational failures were, and a lot of them unfortunately had a dotted line up to very higher echelons as to who set the ROE, the rules of engagement, who controlled ultimately the effects that I was asking for and where to shoot them, and who was slow rolling that, and who ultimately basically let us sit there on the battlefield for 2 hours and get gunned down because there was a leadership challenge that made them indecisive and unable to act or trust the ground fighter. And that's one of the things in the U.S. military we do specifically is we devolve authority to the lowest level.
Yes.
And that person on the ground takes ultimate responsibility above and beyond their pay grade sometimes, especially when they do things like calling danger close missions, which means you're bringing the artillery very close to your friendly forces to your friendly forces. But you, as a ground commander, you claim responsibility by putting your initials on the line saying, I understand, I'm bringing this capability as close as possible to myself because I need it. Or I need that target destroyed, and I understand that that's a civilian target, but it's got to go. You assume that responsibility. They didn't do that. So in that after-action report, a lot of those issues came up. A lot of those concepts of who are we as a fighting force. But more importantly, it started to bump into the political realities where something very interesting was happening during that time. And I say there's the levels of war. You have the strategic, you have the operational, and you have the tactical. Strategic is generals, operations, your colonels. They're kind of, so the strategic level is the generals basically saying we're going to be in Afghanistan and we're going to fight generally this way. Operational is the colonels saying, okay, we're going to get down to the ground level and I'm going to, control this piece of terrain and we're going to start to maneuver my battalions and my companies and we're going to get much more granular as to how we actually get the fight out to the enemy. And then the tactical is the actual, I have a pickaxe in my hand and I'm going to chase you around the battlefield and kill you with it. Levels of war. The political sits on top of all of that. The problem is, in the changing nature of warfare, is that because we have constant persistent surveillance from ISR drones, from aircraft, from SATCOM, from radio relays that go from the ground tactical level. And before in Vietnam, a platoon leader talking to their company commander, that's where that relationship stopped. No one else heard that conversation. Now you have a squad leader who has a 2-star general on the radio with them, who's 500 miles away telling them what to do. And what does that mean? It means the strategic is now touching the tactical. It means that you actually have the decision makers who are supposed to be at that lofty level thinking kind of big thinky stuff on how to win a battle or win the overall campaign, not how to win the battle or even just win that hill. They should be at the campaign level. They're now telling that person who's trying to take the hill what to do. Well, as we know, that makes that person who's trying to take the hill perform poorly. They no longer have the responsibility and autonomy to do what's necessary at their level to win. But it also means if that person wanted to call down and tell that person what to do, responsibility touches them. It means that person who's making that call 500 miles away has responsibility for the outcomes of that tactical level operation and what does or does not happen. And so that's what's starting to happen.
Their fear of consequences plays in, right?
And there's probably a lot of generals who will groan when I say this, but those general officers who wanted to play tactical level, they wanted to play, but they didn't want the responsibility. And on a day like that, when I have somebody who's sitting there 500 miles away, taking the tactical level under their purview and telling us what to do, that means they should share the responsibility. And that's what I said. That didn't go over so well.
Yeah.
And there's another reason for that. The strategic and the political started to touch, where if you start having presidential levels of authority assigning rules of engagement, which before was the purview of the generals, strategic level, now those two levels touch. So when the rules of engagement started to have negative consequences, that's not an issue that only the generals are responsible for. It's now political as well. And that trickles back up to the elected officials who made those decisions.
Which
so you
trickles back
start
down to
warping the nature, that food pyramid effectively of power. You start warping it.
Yeah. That trickles back down to the ground fighter and their ability to have the autonomy to do their job and win.
Yeah. In Vietnam, you had the triple canopy. You had the fog of war, which meant the things that happened on the battlefield oftentimes were unseen or could be dismissed or could be modified to meet the needs of the higher echelons. Triple canopy is gone in Afghanistan. The fog of war is almost completely gone with ISR, everything being recorded, every tactical channel being recorded.
There's lawyers
literally in your ear.
Yeah.
Everyone is now ultimately responsible for what happens to the ground fighter. And that was one of the problems. You can't have an AAR in that environment. People have thin skins. You have too many people who are actually now touching the tactical level where mistakes are made and they realize their careers are on the line. And you have elected officials whose jobs are on the line as well. Mm-hmm. So when you start talking about those rules of engagement causing an uptick in casualties, you saw the course correction to that. They realized that became a political liability. It's no longer civilians, it's U.S. service members. Now they understand the cost of American lives. And that's when they loosened the ROE. Mm-hmm. But it took a lot of incidences, not just mine.
A lot of American lives.
To prove it.
Yeah. Was there any impact on your outspokenness? These things?
Yeah.
I mean, like effective, like productive impact.
So personally, after that action, I was coming up on the end of my tour actually, and I volunteered to extend. I felt that the mission wasn't over, and I felt as though for me to leave at that exact moment would have not shown deference to the loss that we saw that day on that battlefield in terms of how much good had come from the overall mission itself. I wanted to capture those gains. I had the 10th Mountain Division was still there. They were a fantastic unit. I still wanted to work with them. And my Afghans, though dispirited by the fact that they had a huge mass casualty event, did feel emboldened in their mission, and they wanted to fight back. So I felt that there was room for me to stay longer and help capture that and hopefully cement it. Because I was going to be the last person who was going to do my mission specifically in that capacity. There was no backfill for me.
That's what I was going to ask, like not backfill for your other guys. You lost people. Did you get your guys replaced?
I had one other guy. Or now it's just me.
Or just you? Okay. You're the Afghans backfilled. Their loss, right? Their casualties.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you brought up 60,000, war dead. I mean, they're pretty quick to backfill their casualties and produce more, fighting fighters. So when you look at what came of that, for me personally, I realized and was told that I had definitely rubbed some people the wrong way. That there was definitely some hurt feelings, and they weren't all my responsibility. Department of Navy was still pretty angry with Department of Army. Department of Army didn't want to own it. Obviously, DOD has to come in. They have to adjudicate the situation. There's investigations. People start having hurt feelings, ruin careers. And of course, we love to assign blame in the military. So the question is always where we find blame. And unfortunately, we have this nasty tendency to find blame at the lowest level possible, which in this case is complicated by the fact that it's the upper levels that really bore most the responsibility for what set the conditions for the failure.
Yeah.
So that doesn't make you a very popular person with those upper level individuals. So I ended up having to leave Afghanistan, and it wasn't so productive to my career.
Well, let's before we go forward in that, let's go back on the battlefield. Many incidents of heroism and valor are like happen in a moment. People don't even think about what happens. They react by something that was either preconditioned to them or just who they are. This was drawn out. You're fighting for 7 hours, or
7 hours total time.
7 hours total, and but you're making decisions to get in vehicles and go in and get dead and wounded, and putting yourself in harm's way. I mean, this is ultimately what you were awarded the Medal of Honor for. Was there a point to where did you feel like it was a decisive decision of why you were going to go forward? Who were you going to take with you? Were you putting other people at risk? Was it worth going forward for your own safety? What was going through your mind in those moments?
The Medal of Honor is such an interesting award because people can't differentiate the Medal of Honor from like an Olympic award, which is an achievement award, whereas the Medal of Honor really isn't an achievement. It's not something you achieve. It's something you're awarded as a result of intrepidity in the face of an adversary, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it is the nation's highest award, and it is exponentially higher than the next Valor award. But it speaks to valor. And military valor is something that's so unique because, as I always remind somebody, had I been one step to the left, I'd be dead. And maybe it wouldn't have been me talking about the Medal of Honor at all. It just is the nature of warfare, where bullets fill a certain volume, and sometimes your body is where that bullet hits. And that's just the nature of warfare. It's unfair, it's unkind, it's statistical, it's violent. So the Medal of Honor really represents what is fundamental to our fighting spirit, our ethos. And the way I view it is every single service member who raises their right hand and says that they're willing to serve the country immediately has that same fighting spirit and that same ethos. They're trained. It's ingrained in them, basic training and the service academies and everything else, all the feeder programs. And then you get this fighting spirit. You start working with your team. You start understanding what that team is. And these are young kids coming into the military who don't understand these higher philosophical concepts of valor and all of this. And yet we put them on a battlefield, and I see them perform at that level. It's intuitive to them as an American fighting, soldier, Marine, airman. This is what they do. Now they take their training, they take their equipment, they take their team, and they take that ethos and they drive forward in the face of the enemy. They're just simply doing their job. And so I will say I was just simply doing my job. And in the process of doing my job, due to statistics, I didn't get cut down. And due to training, luck, whatnot, I was allowed to go further and further and further in the battlefield to affect a certain outcome that would have been worse had I not been able to do that. But had it not been me, it might have been somebody else. Mm-hmm. And that's the nature of war. That's the nature of the fighting spirit. But that's also what the Medal of Honor is. It recognizes what we're willing to do, but don't always have the opportunity to get there. So I fought alongside Afghans who did valorous things, who were never recognized. I fought besides American Marines and soldiers who did extraordinarily valorous things and were recognized. Maybe not even enough. Would they have done the exact same thing I did? Yeah. Did they do the exact same thing I did? Yes. Did I end up with an award? Yes. Did one other person end up with an award? Yes. But it really recognizes that entire team collaborative effort. We simply were part of a larger entity that all believed in the same thing, but just due to process, I found myself just a little further forward. Now, back to your question of what do you do over 7 hours? What's going through your head? Well, immediately when the first contact happens, everyone gets that pucker factor of, oh, wow, I'm getting shot at. This sucks. And, you realize your mortality pretty quickly when you hear a bullet go whipping by your ear and you're like, wow, one step to the left and I wouldn't be here. I need to get my head down. So it's this professional mitigation of fear and training. Fear is what keeps you alive, but you can't let it control you. It guides you. It reminds you, get your head down. Don't do something stupid. Don't be the hero. You have to get, from here to there without dying in order to get from here to there. So fear helps you. It helps guide you. But you also have to move through your fear and achieve your mission, understanding ultimately that what you're scared of may happen, but you still have to do your job. And literally driving down a road in an armored pickup truck, taking rounds through it, you don't have a lot of time to think about your mortality at that point. You have other people in the truck with you. You have an objective. You have enemy. You have friendlies. You have your mission. But you're weighing a lot of different things. Is this a good idea for me to be in this pickup truck driving down this road? Did I just become a bigger liability? Am I the person who now is going to get rolled up by the Taliban and dragged off to Pakistan and used as a hostage for the next 5 years? Who knows? All these things are kind of simultaneously going through your mind, whether consciously or subconsciously. That's part of your training, especially as a leader. You have to think about a lot of other things aside from just, I'm getting shot at, I need to shoot back. You have to think about the objective picture. But ultimately, you're just getting shot at. So that click next to your ear, that's what you're focused on. And then the next step is what your job is. And the next step is how to mitigate that risk. Is the risk worth it? And of course, you have people with you. So what do they see in you? You're a leader. You have to be there for them to rally them in spirit so that they go forward. A lot of different things happening.
What are some of the other individuals who were awarded for valor that day?
So Dakota Meyer was on the battlefield with us that day. He got the Medal of Honor for his actions in recovering the fallen. Fabio Adamola, who was the S3, he got the Navy Cross. We had another Navy Cross recipient. We had Silver Stars. We had Bronze Stars with V's. There was a lot of Valor awards because there was a lot of valor on that battlefield.
Yeah.
But again, we have regulations. We have a system that assigns awards to certain actions, but that was a collaborative effort. And everyone on that battlefield, if asked to have done the same thing that I did, would have. Yeah.
Well, you've definitely honored the others there as well. And I know that they appreciate that and their families do too. The coming home, the process of, getting nominated for that award is different. Some people takes decades later. What was that process like for you?
And again, I always have to preface this.
Yeah.
Why do we give awards? Why do we have to have awards for valor in the first place? Isn't it just your job? As I said, it was just my job. I was just doing my job. And the answer is, if we do not recognize what it truly takes to show valor on a battlefield, we won't know how to define it when we try to teach the next generation what valor is.
I think other warriors feel they're part of it.
Absolutely.
When someone like you is given a Medal of Honor, and maybe I had a individual sacrifice that was unseen, I felt like we all kind of celebrate that together. I think
it's
a lot
part
of
a collective story.
Feel that. Yeah. A lot of service members feel that way.
So for me specifically, I knew that I was being put in for the award the day after the battle. And I was put in for the award by a unit that I technically didn't even belong to. And being told that you're being put in for any Valor award is a huge event. Being told you're being put in for that award, it's disembodying, especially because you're still processing the fact that you've lost. You've lost a lot of people. You still have the adrenaline still going. There's a bit of rage that you're working with. You want to get back up there and you want to take the fight back to the enemy. You have some payback. And now you're being told, oh, by the way, also we want to give you something that's going to make you, have another little ribbon on your chest, and it's not what you're thinking about. It's not where you're at. But you also have to understand it's a massive, massive privilege just being told that somebody's putting you in for it. Any Valor award. So knowing that had happened, that the award had been put into the system, and then staying in Afghanistan for an additional period of time, having that in the background, it's difficult to really. It's difficult to hold on to because you don't want to differentiate yourself from your peers. You don't want to differentiate yourself from others that you work with. And suddenly you've been put into this separate category. And you have to start thinking, well, what's expected of me now?
Yeah, getting nominated and getting awarded the Medal of Honor is going to change your life. In your professional life in Army, you're not going to be looked at the same as much as you might want to be.
But you're still in theater. You're still literally dealing with the same people that were on that battlefield with you. Right. You're dealing with the same unit that you were with. You were dealing with the same enemy. Nothing has changed except for the fact that now you know that somehow you're different, and whatever happens next, you're going to be viewed differently. You're going to be seen differently. You're going to be treated differently, and ultimately, you, as that individual who's receiving this award, what does that mean for you? What do you do different? What makes you change? And the answer might be nothing.
Right.
Just keep doing what you do to be an inspiration to others. Again, part of the reason I stayed on longer was I wanted it to be clear I wasn't leaving, and I got mine. I'm out.
So you do finally come home. By the way, what was the final result of that Valley?
I mean, the final result of the Valley was knowing the history of the Valley. Alexander the Great had problems. The Afghans had problems. The Soviet had problems. The Taliban had problems. Al-Qaeda had problems. We had problems. Previous units. After we left, the unit that replaced the 10th Mountain had problems. Same Valley, same problem. I'm sure the current Taliban government.
Ganjgal Valley, right?
Ganjgal Valley. I'm sure that the current Taliban government still is having problems with that valley. It's just who they are. It's what they do. They're smugglers. They've been doing this time immemorial, 1,000 years. It's who they are. Did it collectively change that valley? Not particularly. Did it change the perception in that province? Absolutely. And did it even have an indelible effect after the Taliban took over? I'm fairly certain that the people of Kunar understood that they had the resilience and capability to fight back. That even though they have a government that they did not want, that government, that Taliban government that's parked in Kabul, knows that the people of Kunar are willing to fight. And that's where you have this interesting detente in Afghanistan where, yes, the Taliban is in charge, but how much do they truly control a rest of province? So I think that we'd even have an indelible effect there that might be positive at some point in the future. Yeah. If there's a seed of insurgency or rebellion or pushback or change, those change agents, I believe, will be where they saw the Americans most effective in working alongside their Afghan partners.
So you come home, you go to the White House, and President Obama hangs the Medal of Honor on your neck. And you represent all the heroism that not only yourself, but everything that took place in that valley that day. But you stay in the Army. I mean, how do you go to work the next day? Like, how do you show up? You get the Medal of Honor. How do you go to work the next day? Everything has to change, right?
The thing was, and not everyone knows that they're put in for the award.
Right.
Not everyone knows. Not everyone has the same behind the scenes visibility that I did. So I knew day 2, or day 1 technically, I'd been put in. Not everyone knows that. They go about their careers. They're put in for a award. It gets upgraded years later. They're not thinking about it, or they didn't know it happened until a year or 2 on. They're told, oh, by the way, you're going to get this award. For me, I knew, and I saw the sausage being made. Was unfortunately part of the sausage being made, which nobody should ever have to see. It was definitely a interesting period of time, and it was not exactly a highlight for some people in high levels of government. But I'd say the mistakes were identified, addressed, corrected. Apologies were made, and we've moved on. But for me specifically, the White House, and this goes back to like what we do as a fighting force, what we do as a country, how we represent military valor, how we see the martial tradition in our citizenship. What was so amazing about that event is the President of the United States of America, You have the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. You have the Joint Chiefs. You have senior military leadership. You have senior elected leadership. You have prominent members of society in a room to give an award to a single soldier in this case. But in that room also are all the families that lost their sons, husbands, and fathers. They were all there in the front row. And almost every single Marine that was at that battlefield was sitting in that room. And what that did was it recognized the fighting spirit, it recognized the actual fighters, and it recognized the families that give so much that always goes unaddressed, never gets enough respect or deference. The families got recognized as well. So that was a critical moment for me, was being part of, I hope, their healing process. Mm-hmm. I'd like to think it was part of their healing process because I'd like to think that they saw what they lost, their family members, something in that room that reflected on them. Yeah. And I believe it did. Yeah. So going on from that point, you represent something that's above and beyond yourself. You represent something that's bigger than yourself.
It's a burden of responsibility.
Massive burden of responsibility.
Yeah.
And we briefly discussed this earlier, but a lot of recipients and a lot of people get these high-level awards for whatever reason, it becomes a burden on their careers and they have to find something else to do. They have to pivot away from government service, from military service, whatever it is. They need something else to define the rest of their lives. Mm-hmm. And I think part of it is, after you get an award like that, what do you do with yourself? I mean, how do you continue to prove yourself? It's a difficult place to be. And then how do you be that persistent beacon and icon that maybe you're not? I mean, that's the most amazing thing about it. I see myself as a fairly ordinary soldier doing my job. I get placed in an extraordinary situation. I think that I do my job. It was an extraordinary situation, so extraordinary things come out of it. And now I am now burdened with this extraordinary award, but I just want to be an ordinary soldier. So how do you do those two things simultaneously? Well, I might have pulled it off, but we'll see.
Well, I mean, like you said, you just retired, but you've done some amazing things with it. You've served on in multiple foundations, the Medal of Honor Society, the Medal of Honor Foundation, maybe another one I'm missing, and also working now with a company we're both friends with, James Loomis and Jay Redmond with the TurboVets to help our service members who are disabled process the VA system. Mm-hmm. And so can you talk about the different charitable work you've done and organizations you've been part of, and you're using that platform with that award to give back?
So one of the recipients from Vietnam, he has a great saying that the award doesn't make you extraordinary, but it allows you to do extraordinary things. Mm. And it gives you a platform. So the platform that I was given with this award, part of it is we already have an organization, the Medal of Honor Society, which represents the 61 living recipients currently and all the recipients that have come before us and whomever comes next. But we represent the continuity to preserve, protect, and promote the award. So these 61 living recipients are all part of the organization. It's congressionally chartered, and it is our mission to ensure that the Medal of Honor remains in the American ethos and the American mind, because it's so important that we have these symbols, this mythology that helps define who we are as a country, who we are as citizens, who we are as Americans. And that's one of our core missions. And the society, in partnership with the Medal of Honor Foundation, which supports the society, has that as its core mission. We have additional missions as well. The National Medal of Honor Museum, Arlington, Texas, that allows us to have a physical home for these stories. And we like to think of the museum as a repository, not of artifacts and not of stories of individuals, but of stories that ordinary Americans can go and look at and see that they're real, they're tangible, they're physical, but at the same time take those stories and try to internalize them into their lives. How can they be better citizens? How did this person in this moment, in this millisecond of decision-making, do something so heroic? Or how this person do it over the course of 3 days in the Ia Drang Valley? Who are these people who are ordinary Americans put in the worst of situations and did some of the most human things. How did they do that? And how do you reflect that back into your life as an American? That's what we like to think we're doing there. We have our Griffin Leadership Institute, which helps take these stories and articulate them into, for example, the corporate leadership space. How do you take a corporation's emerging leadership and how do you put these values into them so that they can be a better company, have better leaders, but also have better outcomes for the country as well? How do they stay centered in what their ethos should be as well? And we have a monument that we're going to do in DC because obviously the nation's capital needs to have symbols, physical symbols that recognize this. It's just part of who we are. If we don't have these things to look to, we'll forget them. And he who forgets history is doomed to repeat it. So those are what the three things that I've been empowered to do that are extraordinary. And then the things that I want to do that are change agents in this country are to take care of our service members and our veterans. Mm-hmm. And one of the interesting things that we as recipients get to do is we get to be involved in a lot of different things governmentally, societally, and in the corporate space. It's given me a lot of access, a lot of reach, and a lot of visibility to a lot of problems that not that the ordinary veteran would see, and not that some of the normal transitioning service member gets to see. So seeing these problem sets and actually having experienced them recently as I transitioned out of service, it was very prescient that I came across an answer to a lot of the problems that I was seeing. And the answer that I saw was TurboVets. So Joe Loomis was a Navy veteran, and he came to a conclusion that with technology as it is right now, we can bring a better product to the veteran as they transition from active service into the veteran space that allows them to maximize what they're entitled to what their benefits should be, to what their health records show. It maximizes what they've earned, but it also streamlines and maximizes the efficiency of the VA to be an effective organization that's responsible to the taxpayer as well as to the veteran. So that's what we're trying to do right now, is how do we make this a better transitional experience for our service members? How do we take care of them? This is a national imperative to ensure that everything that they've earned, everything that they're entitled to, everything that will make them a better citizen as they move on to the next step of their journey, that they have that provided as a stepping stone to the next thing in their process.
Whereas I don't know why I know his name's Joe, but I keep calling him James Loomis. I don't know why.
Joe
He
Loomis.
looks like a James.
Yeah, you can make him a James.
Yeah, we can make him a James. But he's brilliant, by the way. He's just a brilliant guy. He's had a lot of success before this, and I think he's surrounded himself with the right people for this. There's some really great veterans who truly care that are helping, and you being one of them. And I've rogered up to be on an advisory board, as well as Jay Redmond and some others. But you have the insider look of where they are right now. Where are they? Where are they in the phase of implementation of the system that TurboVets is going to bring to bear for veterans?
If you look at the problem set that stands before TurboVets as a company and the service member transitioning into the veteran, the problem as it exists is you have the number one budget line item in the federal government, the DoD, working alongside the second largest budget line item, which is the VA. Mm-hmm. These are two massive organizations. They have a disparate, sprawling portfolio of responsibilities, and their core objective on the DoD side is to fight and win America's wars, and the VA's side is to take care of the veteran. And that's a huge portfolio as well, because that's housing, that's training, that's healthcare benefits, that's hospitals, that's cemeteries. There's so many different things in both of these baskets. So how do we help them with that touch point between their two organizations, where they're taking the most cherished product that each of them has, which is that American citizen who signed up to serve? How do we help them transition that person most effectively? So where we are at right now is in discussions with both those parties, with the DoD and the VA, is how to bring them together most effectively, take our technology to maximize the capabilities of what already exists. These are pre-existing things that exist in the space of electronic records. They have databases. They have service records that are coming in from multiple different locations. How do you take all this data? How do you aggregate it? And then how do you integrate it into a single platform that maximizes the ease of use for the service member, the VSOs, the VA. How do we do that? It's TurboVets. Where are we? The conversations. We need to have buy-in from both of those parties to ensure this product can be put where it needs to be, which is with the transitioning service member.
What's TurboVets look like to the service members or transitioning service members?
What it should look like to them right now is something that's very comfortable and very seamless to what their usual experience is in the internet space or in any of the other things that they touch in their everyday lives. When you pick up your phone and you have an app and you go to your bank, it's usually an app that allows maximum efficiency for you to achieve what you need to achieve on that banking app or on your text apps. All these things are designed specifically to maximize user effectiveness. The problem with government is it maximizes user effectiveness in silos. And each of these silos may be a very effective silo for the end user who is a trained professional, a contractor, a government employee, but it doesn't maximize efficiency for the service member who's moving from one of those silos to the next silo to the next silo. That's the problem, is we need to have a way to take this data and integrate it so that the service member can seamlessly transition. So what the product will look like for them is one of the everyday apps, one of the everyday web platforms that they utilize that allows them to seamlessly work in their workflows. So imagine that you take all of your service records, all your medical records, and everything that defines you in service, and you put it in one single platform. So when you come into the military, all those records, everything that you had when you first came in through that MEP station is seamlessly available to you. That seems easy to us. We all have Dropbox or iCloud or any of those other things that save our data. Yeah. DoD doesn't do that. No. So if you want to find your MEPS record, you're going to have to request it, and it's going to come in a paper form. Well, what data is in there that's relevant to the transitioning service member? There might be a lot in there. There might be medical records that are important. There might be data points about their education that are important. There might be so many different things that need to be pulled from that data set that they first came in with into the service that would be relevant to what they do when they leave. Wouldn't it be better as a transitioning service member to know that you were interested when you were in high school in computers, that you were interested in computers, and that you got a certification from high school to do something with Windows or a Microsoft cert? Well, what that does is when you're transitioning out, if someone knows that, if the system knows that that was your interest, when you're transitioning out of the service, maybe we're going to focus in on, hey, you were interested in this. Here are your opportunities through the VA. Here are the training programs. Here's the opportunities for you that we think are going to maximize your ability to transition successfully into the civilian space. But as of now, those MEPS records are lost in time. So why don't we start to aggregate the data effectively of those service members through their entire journey, through their service careers? And then when we transition them, we have maximum visibility, maximum knowledge, and technology is at the point now where we can do a deep dive to figure out how to get everything to connect together. Yeah. Education, training, health records, medical disability ratings, all of these things come together effectively for that transition.
I was just, sitting with Secretary of the VA, Doug Collins, in the previous interview, and one of the things that I said was my biggest long-standing issue was the medical record system in the active duty military side, that it was separate from the VA side. So essentially, for those that aren't familiar with this, when you're a service member, you have this medical system in the DoD, all paper, by the way, and then you EAS, end of active service, you get out, and now you have to restart the process as an applicant to the VA and start all over again. You transition doctors, you transition care, and for the work I do at Mighty Oaks, a lot of the people we see that are at a very low point are people in that transition. Trying to navigate that system. They feel like it's frustrating to navigate that system. They're doing things all over again. And then oftentimes changes in medication and changes in care are very disruptive to someone, especially dealing with PTSD or mental health. And so talking to Secretary Collins, and him saying he's spoken to Secretary Hegseth, who's now you got the Secretary of the VA and the DoD talking about some consistency. I think that's a really good sign, and I think it's just in time for TurboVets to get in there and assist with this.
But I think one of the more important things about TurboVets, and this is what makes it most effective, is you can give a transitioning service member a telephone book of options of things that they can do to seek help, seek care, seek resilience training, all of these things. And they're going to look at this book and they're not going to know where to begin because all you did is give them 10,000 options. And you're not helping them understand where they're at, what's been successful for other people. There's no performance indicators in any of this. It's just, here's the book, figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
Again, if you start to aggregate information about somebody from the beginning of their career all the way through, you don't silo this information in paper form or in 10 different systems. If we actually get a full scope understanding of who that transitioning service member is, maybe we do know. You know what's going to work out well for this person? Mighty Oaks. Why do we know this? Because it has this level of efficacy on the backside that the VA has told us about. We have this amount of veterans saying that this is what worked for them. And these are the reasons why Mighty Oak is going to work specifically with this veteran. And there are indicators that can be used with modern technology, AI and things like that. They can say, this person, you know what? They have a strong faith background. They have a significant need to have peer counseling. They don't want to be in a clinical setting, but they know that they want some level of assistance, not help, but they want assistance. Like even words have meaning in these situations. And what we want to do as TurboVets is ensure that that whole phone book, we make it effective to the service member by finding specifically what's going to work for them. Give them the suggestions of saying, we really think this is what's going to be most beneficial for you. Here's a menu of options that we think is going to work best for you versus just throwing the book down and saying, figure it out.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it and, very thankful to be a part of it. And it was really excited to learn that you're, full-time leading in charge there. So couldn't think of a better person. I know you have a flight to catch because I could sit here and ask you more questions all day long, but kind of the final thing I want to ask is on the subject of resiliency. It's the Resiliency Show, and all of the guests that come on get asked the same question. What does resiliency mean to you?
Resiliency is something that I think is an enduring challenge for everybody. You cannot just show up resilient. Resiliency is something that continually needs to be worked on. You need to be continually polishing that steel. You need to be reforging it. You need to be fixing it. This is something that's an enduring challenge for everybody. If you sit back and you just think, okay, I'm good, you're missing it. You're missing what's actually happening to you. You're going to start losing track. Resiliency means having an objective, truthful look into yourself and saying, who am I? What are my challenges right now? And having that network as well, like peer mentorship, where somebody who knows you well enough can say, hey, I've been watching you. I think that you need to do a series of things to make yourself resilient again. You're not taking care of yourself. You're not going on runs. Your work schedule's off. There's so many different things that can prove resiliency in somebody or that they're slipping. So I think resiliency for me really does come down to the daily challenge of ensuring that I'm the best person that I can be and identifying when I'm not and realistically what I can do to improve. And I think the realistic component of that is you can't be your best self every day, but you can always strive to be. And that's resiliency for me.
Well said. Well said. Well, it's awesome to have you here. Well, we have some amazing sponsors that support this show. Smith & Wesson Firearms, Vortex Optics, Gators Eyewear. We have some BioPro, all-natural supplement to growth hormone therapy. And some of my books, some Mighty Oak swag. We're going to leave you kind of kitted out, but the Smith & Wesson's on you. We're going to have you go to through a list of guns and pick a Smith & Wesson. I know, like I said, this was kind of last minute. We're going to have you pick a Smith & Wesson gun, and we'll get a Smith & Wesson gun and an optic out to you and your favorite pair of Gators.
Right on.
So we'll leave you set up. But, man, it was super great having you in town, and I'm sure we'll be working together at TurboVets here in the near future. So I look forward to it.
Cool.
So, guys, if you have not done so yet, please like, comment, subscribe, share this episode so people could hear the amazing story of heroism and courage from Will. But not only that, he just some really inspiring words today that I know will encourage someone. If you've not already done so, also, please join our Patreon family. It's where we have some behind-the-scenes content, and it's one of the best ways to support the show. So join and become a Patreon member today. God bless and stay resilient. Hey, what's up, Resilient family? I am so grateful for each of you who tune in every week to hear our episodes. We have such incredible guests and topics that I am passionate about, our team's passionate about, and we could not do it without you. So we're thankful for you. We love you. We appreciate you locking arms with us to be more informed, to become a more resilient community. And I want to invite you to become a tighter part of that community by joining us on Patreon. If you go to our show notes below, you can click the link and get dialed into our Patreon and get extra content weekly. You could join for $15 a month and get behind the scenes footage, get closer access to me. I have monthly Zooms that I'll be doing with some members of the community. And so we'd love to get more involved. Again, go below in the show notes and click the link and join today.